Hi, okay, so in this tutorial I'm going to introduce the concept of camera projection and show you how that works. So in order to do that, I'm going to open up my read node by pressing R, and I'm going to bring in this JPEG image called corridor. If I connect that up to the viewer for a second by pressing the number 1 key as a shortcut, connects it as a 1 input to the viewer, you'll see it's just a still image of a corridor. And what we're going to do is we're going to in 3D space, create a similar layout to this corridor, and then we're going to project this image onto it so that we can actually move through it as though we were moving through something in 3D space. I'm just going to disconnect that for a second, and I'm going to bring in some 3D nodes. So in order to do that, we need a few 3D nodes. Okay, press the tab key to allow me to search for nodes, and I'm going to type in camera. So we're going to use a camera node. We're also going to use a scene node. Okay, and finally we're going to use a scanline renderer. And so you need a camera in order to move through 3D space. The scene node is the thing that allows you to connect your 3D objects to it, so you can have as many 3D objects as you like in the scene. And your scanline renderer is the thing that converts your 3D into 2D. So think about it just like any other renderer in a 3D application. Okay, so it has a camera input, so we'll connect that. And it has a scene input, and then we connect that up, and that's generally your basic setup for 3D. Think about it as everything that's above the scanline renderer here, so your cameras, your scene, anything else is 3D, and everything beneath it is 2D. As a quick example of that, if I say for example go into here, bring in a blur node, I can't connect that up to a scene or so on because it's a 3D node, but you'll see directly under the scanline renderer it drops in. Okay, so like I said, you're working with 3D up here, and then you're in a sense rendering it out and creating 2D images beneath it, and then you can sort of continue on adding effects or anything else using your normal 2D nodes. It also has a background input, so you can have a background if you connect that up just so that you can look at something while you're working through, so it allows you to sort of work out placement of 3D objects, things like that. But we won't be keeping that connected when we're actually going to do a projection, a camera projection. Now, to make things a bit simpler, I'll show you what a final camera projection is trying to do. But just before I do that as well, by the way, now we've got this set up, if you want to look at your 3D scene, what you can do is with your mouse in your viewer, press the tab key, and that will switch to 3D view. Press tab again, and you switch back to 2D. You can also do it by just clicking on the drop down here. It's the same thing. Tab key is just the shortcut. Once we're in 3D, if you use your middle mouse button, if you've got a scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. If you press the middle mouse button in, it should zoom into your 3D objects. And if you hold the control key down and click and drag, you should be able to rotate around in 3D space as well. Okay, so those are kind of the key things that you would usually use it for. And then pressing the middle mouse button and dragging allows me to sort of move in 3D space as well. Right, okay, so you'll see we can't see the background in there, although we can see it in 2D view, because like I said, that background input is just to allow you to see something here in 2D. It doesn't exist in 3D space. But, like I said, I'll quickly show you what a final camera projection actually is meant to look like. So with a camera projection, what you want to think about is this camera here is no longer a camera. Think of it like a projector, okay? Any other projector, it's just projecting an image out. What is it projecting onto? So first thing we need is a surface. So what I'm going to do is press the tab key to bring up my search box for nodes, and I'm going to type in camera. Sorry, I'm not typing in camera. What am I doing? I'm going to type in card, and I'm going to go for that card, not card 3D. Go for my card here, and you see we've got this card shape, and I'm going to connect that up to the scene. Okay, and now that that's connected up, let's pull this back a bit so we can actually see it on the camera. Now, like I said, this is just to give you an idea of what it'll look like at the end. So when we're finished, what we'll use is a project 3D node. Okay, and that connects up to there. And you'll see the project 3D node has two inputs. One for a camera, so we say that's the projector. And the other input is what do you want to project. So we select an image that we want to project. And you'll see now what happens is, we can disconnect the camera from there, by the way. And you see now what happens is, the image is actually showing up on the card. But a lot smaller, and that's because at the moment, because that's to do with the size of the card. So if I double click the card and just scale it up a bit, you'll see the image shows up in its entirety now. There. By the way, the reason we're getting this view is just because we haven't got a camera connected, and so this is kind of the default view. But if we just move around here for a second, if we go to the card, just to show you this, so you'll see if I move the card, if you can see that very well, let's zoom in a bit like this, you'll see that no matter where that card goes, the image never moves. So the card is really just a surface, and the camera is projecting that image, that's all. Okay, and that's basically what we're going to do, but a little bit more complicated. Rather than projecting onto a flat piece of card, well, I say rather than projecting on a flat piece of card, we are going to project onto a flat card, but why keep the card just facing the surface of, or the lens of the camera? Instead, why not actually rotate the card? So you can see, by the way, the projection still appears the same, but why not, say, rotate the card for one wall and then have another card for the other part of the wall and another one for another part, and actually recreate this scene in 3D space. That's basically what we're going to do. We're going to use a series of cards and we're going to recreate this scene, and then we're going to project that same background onto all those cards. Okay, and then we should actually be able to move through that scene, and that should give us a sense of being in a true 3D space. So, right, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to delete all this stuff and go back to kind of where we were initially. So like I said, that's our end output. Okay, so let's begin with that. So the reason, so like I said, we're kind of back with our camera, our object and scene, and our background here going into the scan line. So the reason I put that background in is just so that we can see where our cards actually need to go. So we'll start with one card, and we'll connect that up, and it should appear, depending on where it is in here. Okay, right now it starts at the same central point. Oops. So it's kind of behind the camera, so in a way, so we need to pull that forward, but you'll see it appears as just a big black surface because it's got no texture on it and it's got no light hitting it. If I pull it back far enough, you'll see it's a lot smaller. So we could start to, in 2D space, just start to align that card up, but it can be a little bit difficult, I would say, when you're looking at it like that. So to make it a little bit easier, you'll see a card has an image input, so you can add textures to it. So you could take an image or anything else. What we'll do is we're going to use a grid, okay, and we're going to connect that grid up to the card, and you'll see now it shows a grid on there. Every time, by the way, I add a new node, the properties appear on here. It can start to get a bit messy, I find, so I like to just click the little X and close everything down, and then open up just the properties I'm looking at. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if we look at that in 3D space, you can see the grids are there, but I'm going to just increase the size a little bit. And by doing that, it just makes it a little bit clearer. So this is the first card we're going to use. Now, looking at this scene, by the way, as well, okay, just going to highlight both of these and press D for disable for a second, so they're gone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a card that's going to run along here for the floor. I'm going to have one for this wall, one for that wall, a fourth one here for this wall at the front, fifth one for the ceiling, and then a sixth one for that wall at the back. So that's how I'm going to create the scene. Okay, so highlight these again, sorry, D for disable, bring that back. However, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the floor rather than starting with one of the walls and so on. Floor is usually a good place to begin because you can figure out where that is in 3D space. Or where it was in the scene itself. So you can ask yourself, well, is the camera sort of tilted down a little bit? How high does it sort of appear off the floor? Things like that, and you can kind of start to arrange that. So we've got a card and grid. One thing that you would want to do early on, if you know the information, is go into the camera itself. Go into the projection tab and set up the focal length if you know what it was on the camera that originally took this image. Now I think for this one it was 24mm, so if I change that to 24 and press enter, you'll see that grid moves a lot further back. It's not moved in 3D space or anything. All that's happened is we've just changed it to a wider lens. But if you are going to do that at the very beginning. You don't want to do it halfway through arranging your cards because they'll all move because of the lens. So once you start to arrange these cards, you kind of have to keep the lens as it is. So only do that if you know which lens was used, but you can sometimes have a look at a scene and try to figure out which type of lens you might have been used. So you can usually see if it's quite a wide lens or a zoom lens anyway. Right, okay, so we go to our first card. So we can, if we want to, hold the control key, and we could just sort of rotate the card, or probably better on that axis. There we go, that way. Or I'll just undo that. Or what we can do is go into the card properties. So again, I'll just close all that, open up our card properties, and we could do it in here as well. So we've got things like translate, rotate, scale and so on. Okay, so I'm going to go into rotate here and type in 90 for 90 degrees. Okay, there we go. At the moment though, what you'll probably find is if we jump back to our 2D view, we can't see the card at all. And if we have a look, the default sort of starting point for cards and or any 3D objects is this sort of grid floor we've got, and so the camera is kind of well, its center point is about here, so it's halfway into that floor. So obviously looking at that scene, we can tell the camera is definitely not on the floor, so we're going to raise this camera up to start with. Okay, now obviously we're doing this a little bit by eye, and it's you know, you have to sort of figure out where things sit right. What I would say is once you've kind of set the camera up with the floor, you probably want to leave it there, and then after that it's about moving all the other cards. But what we'll do is, so we'll kind of see if we can figure that out. Now we can, by the way, you'll see I'm jumping back through 3D and 2D, and you can see even when I'm in 2D I can still move the card around there. But let's make this a little bit bigger, so let's pull that down. Okay, there we go, makes it a little bit easier. So to me that seems sort of okayish right now. I'm going to start to try to recreate the size of the floor and things like that, and then I'll get a better idea if it needs further adjustments. So for example, one of the things right now adjustment wise that is going to need is the scale. So I think it's the Y. In fact, let's zoom in here so we see it like that, and let's just give it a number, say 24. Yeah, okay, so you can see I've just extended its scale that way, and the reason I did that is so you can see it's kind of running along now like the floor is. You can see it's going in completely the wrong direction, and again I'm going to use a rotate in order to do that. Now a quick way to do that, rather than, like I said, you know, holding the control key down and trying to rotate like this, and I find it really difficult sometimes in 2D view, and you can see it's kind of trying to spin that ball around, and it's going to just give me a weird finish. I can just go into rotate here, and the thing is, rather than even typing in a number, because even a little number change can make a massive difference sometimes, what you can do is, if you click and place your cursor at any point, using the middle mouse button, if you've got it on your, a little scroll wheel on your mouse, when you use that scroll wheel while that cursor is there, it will change the number to the right. So if I start to do that now, you can see it's changing the number to the right. Okay, and that's fine. And if that was not a big enough increment, and to be honest, it seems fine, I could just click here. So now I've clicked there, it's literally going to change the number to the right. So it's going to go from 13 to 14. That's going to be a massive jump. So you'll see if I do that. Yeah, a little bit too big a jump. So I'll keep it here, and I can just move that around. And I find that's a good way to do it. So that's not too bad right now. I'm going to just sort of pull that in there. And again, you can see, well, you can see here it's not rotated all the way around yet. I think it's just slightly off because the gap here is kind of big, but over here it's you can see it's getting further and further into that side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the rotation a bit more yet, and that seems a bit better, perhaps. And then it's just, like I said, a case of trying to get it into the right spot. By the right spot, I just mean sort of position generally where I think that floor is. And again, like I said, it still needs a little bit of movement there. Right, okay, so that seems a bit better. And then what we can do is go into scale, and I think it will be this one. And again, if the number's too big there, the number change, I'll just click here and it'll do a smaller increment. And just going to enlarge this. Now, the important thing, or what we're going to be trying to do with this, is just get it to make sure when we create all the cards that they all touch, okay, that they all meet. So we don't want to leave any gaps. So with this, I have to kind of decide, where do I want my endpoint to be? Do I want it to be there, or do I want it to be here? I'm a little bit fine with it. I'm okay with it going a little bit over. I think it'll be fine with that. But that's kind of one card done so far. It looks like it needs to go a little bit further down, so I'm just going to pull that back, jump back into 2D view. You can see it doesn't really reach the end, so that needs a little bit of work. So I'm going to just do that, okay, and try. You can see it's getting there slowly. But that's basically what we're going to be doing, okay? And then at some point, hopefully, and right now that feels like it's going kind of high, so I might need to look at the tilt on the camera. I think it might have just been slightly tilted, but I'm going to adjust that, and then so I'll be coming back in another tutorial where we're going to work on the sides and so on. But that's just hopefully getting you started on sort of putting your cards into the scene. Okay, so I'll see you in tutorial number 2.